bachelor degree and master's degrees from the Technion in Israel, and his doctorate from the New England College of Optometry. She received many distinctions for his work. He was awarded honorary degrees of an honorary degree of Master in Medicine by Harvard Medical School, and an honorary Doctor of Science degree from the State University of New York. Many awards too. Just this year he received 2. They also shade prize from the Society of for Information Display and the Edwin H. Land Medal awarded jointly by the Optical Society of America and the Society for Imaging Sciences and Technology. He has over 140 peer-reviewed papers and 9 patents, 8 US patents and a Japanese one. And welcome to Boulder.
Thank you, Ariel. And with all, thank you all. With all these awards, I still don't have an image on the screen. Now we can get to the main event, I hope. Okay. So, first of all, the mandatory disclosure for us in the medical area, we have to disclose financial interest. So I do have financial interest in a number of the things that are going to be discussed today. So you can figure that into what you want to believe. Okay, vision is a dynamic process. It is a dynamic process in a space variant system. What do I mean? When you're in the airport terminal running and you look over here at the back of the woman, you can see every strand of hair, but around you actually things are blurry because the visual system has this space variant where there's high resolution only in the center and it fades away, the resolution fades away dramatically as you move out. So if you move your eyes to look at this guy, then that becomes sharp and that lady's hair is now blurry. And if you then look at this guy's, then this becomes sharp and you still have this blurriness around, but the perception we have as we run through that terminal is this wide field, high resolution image everywhere. Now how does that happen? Well, it happens through a process of sampling, and the sampling is very coarse. We only take 3 to 5 of these samples per second, and the sharp vision is limited to 2 degrees, 5 degrees, centrally out of the 180 degrees that we have. So with a few samples per second, you don't get a lot of coverage, and yet it's enough for us to get this perception. And I say that this is done through this process of vision multiplexing by sampling like this. And what happened with eye diseases is that they affect either the eye resolution fovea, the place where you have this sharp vision in diseases such as macular degeneration, diabetic retinopathy, and many, many others. Or it affects the wide peripheral field in diseases such as retinitis pigmentosa, glaucoma, and hemianopia. When you lose either of these, that prevents this interplay of central and peripheral vision that gives us this nice, wide, and high resolution field of view all the time. So traditional devices for people with low vision try to restore this missing component. But usually they do that at a great compromise for the other. Magnification improves resolution, everybody knows that, but magnification inherently limits the field of view. So if you try to improve the resolution, you limit the field of view. Minification can increase the field of view. If you have a reduced field of view and you minify, you'll get more of the world into that field of view. But that obviously reduces resolution, and nobody likes to lose resolution. That's why there are people here thinking about contact lens and glasses, because everybody wants to see sharp vision. So we came up with this concept of vision multiplexing and apply it with different techniques to retain both central and peripheral functions. And we say that we would like to maintain free eye movement because this is how it's done in normal vision, but it's not really mandatory. And I'm going to try to illustrate this idea of vision multiplexing with examples from various conditions and various devices that we've been working on. So we'll start with concentric peripheral field loss. So the normal visual field extends about 180 degrees. So if you put your hands like this, you can see both hands at the same time. In glaucoma and retinitis pigmentosa, this shrinks into the middle. When it's about the size of my hands at arm length, the way the field is reduced to this, it's about 20 degrees in diameter, and that's legal blindness in most places. When it is 10 degrees, just one hand, think about just seeing where my hand is. Everything else is not seeing. We call that tunnel vision. At this situation, the visual acuity, the sharpness may maintain and may still be sharp. So these people can read the newspaper with no problem, work on a computer with no problem, but they have mobility problems. They have problems in detecting obstacles and navigating their ways. There are minimal visual aids help available to them. One previous approach that I already mentioned is minification. And one approach within that was to use a reverse telescope. If you wear a telescope in reverse, it's minified. So if you think about, again, being in that terminal and having this only the residual field, and you're going to try to run around these guys. If you run to the left, you're going to bump into this guy. If you run to the right, you're going to bump into this lady because you don't see them as you're looking straight. So people came up with this reverse telescope that is cylindrical rather than spherical, so that it minifies only in the horizontal dimension, because that's the dimension that's more important to expand the field. And by doing that, you reduce the loss of resolution to some degree. And so with such a device, looking through it, there's a hint of the man in this side, a hint of the woman on that side, and you should be able to detect them and therefore avoid this collision. But it does reduce resolution, and as a result, get rejected by patients, and a couple of years ago it got discontinued. It's not even available anymore. The approach we took to this, which we called augmented view for tunnel vision, involved using a see-through head-mounted display. So it's a display that you can see through. The grayscale image here represents an ambient scene, and then there's a camera on it that takes a picture of the scene, a video, processes it in real time to create a cartoon. The field of view of the camera is wider than the field of view of the display. That results in a minification of the display. So you get a minified cartoon which gives you a wider field of view within the residual field, but you can still look through it and maintain the full color, sharpness, and all the nice properties of the residual vision in the middle. We call that spatial multiplexing by superposition, because there can be other spatial multiplexing, as you'll see. And of course, this cartoon only occupies a few % of the screen, so you can really look through it. It's still kind of hard to think about what does that look like. So this is an example of a person with 5 degrees residual field looking across the table at a person. You can see that you can see the head of the person across the table with full color and resolution, but nothing else. But with the display, you can see that that person is sitting in a chair across a conference table. There are other chairs around it, so you get an idea of what it is. But again, static images are difficult to illustrate vision, because as I said right from the beginning, vision is a dynamic process. So this video is trying to show what that looks like in a dynamic situation. So we're back at the same conference table, and if you have only 5 degrees of view, looking at a table is very boring because every piece is the same. But with this device, you can see that there's a newspaper here. And if you move that to the center of your field of view, then you'll see the whole actual newspaper, and you can read it. You can see all there is. You can notice that there's a mug on that table. And again, if you move it into the center of the field, then you can see all of it. And going across, you can see that guy sitting across. You can see some instrument there, and that's an old instrument called VCR. And There are we back to that guy across the table. So it gives you an idea of what one would see with this. Now, people wear this on their head, so it has to be accepted cosmetically. It has to have also good ergonomic. But the acceptance, the cosmetic issue, we use the word cosmetic, but it's not really that it's sharp looking or good. That is a good property for it too. The truth is that it has to be not very noticeable, because people with impaired vision can hide their impairment, and they like to hide it. So there is a big issue about these things having to look reasonably well. And this is one of those, and you can see the see-through display here. The display is actually here, and it displayed through a beam splitter onto the screen this way. So taking a picture through this display, this is actually a picture taken through the display. You can see the field of where the display is, and this shading just shows the residual field of a patient. A patient with that field will only see the doorknob ahead, but will not see the woman or the recycling bin on this side. But with the display, he can note that they are there, and of course he can move his eyes and see them right and left and scan to find that. So this is, again, the kind of view that you see, and this is actually taken through that display. So what one would expect wearing such a device? One positive effect of the magnification is that it should improve detection of objects or obstacles, and so you should have better performance in visual search if you're looking for things. So we've done an experiment in which we had a target on the screen. This is the residual field of the patient, and this is the field of the HMD. And so we put targets on the screen that are outside of the patient visual field. The frame of the target is high contrast, so the contour is picked up and is displayed, but the letter inside is low contrast, so it's not being picked up. In order to read the letter, the user actually have to find that real letter. And then we give them this task. They start here and they look, and as you can see, this is eye movement recording. There's an aimless search around until it gets into the field of view, and then he knows where to go and find the letter and read it. But doing the same thing with the display, now the image of the target appears here, so there's one movement quickly in that direction. Now the user knows where it is. Another saccade brings him close to there. It's within the field of view, and they can find it. So directness is improved with the device, as you saw in this illustration, and we developed a measure of directness. But even with the multiplexing device, it's only half as good as normally sighted. So this is a big improvement, but it's not solving the problem. Search time is reduced with the device. The larger effect for larger search area, that's expected and good. And it is a larger effect for patients with larger residual field. That is a more complicated situation that I don't have time to get into now. But if you want to read more about it, this is published, and all the papers that are published will be illustrated like this with a yellow highlight at the bottom of the slide. And they are all available for download on my website, so you can go there and dig deeper into any of these questions. There are also always side effects to things you do, and detrimental effect of magnification could be mislocalization of detected obstacle. What do I mean? If this is the situation, and this is the guy here, his cartoon is here, so he's appearing to be closer to your path. And you may think that you're going to run into him looking at him at this thing. And this is true of everything will be closer to your own path. And this may make patients overestimate the potential collision risk. And if it does, it may discourage them from using this device, because they'll always have these false alarms about colliding with things that they wouldn't collide with. So to test this, we use this a virtual obstacle course. Unfortunately, the computer is on a stamina, so it moves slowly. But you can see what there is: a corridor of a mall simulated on a treadmill. the patient is on the treadmill and this object appears. The best thing that they could find that is scary is myself in ski outfit. So that's what's on the screen. And the subject in this experiment is not seeing that view, but rather only the camera is exposed and everything else is covered. And the subject only sees the minified view. Because in the normal use of this device, you have both the minified view and the full view. So the subject could correct for this by looking around. We wanted just to see whether they can work with the minified view, because this correction takes time and may be too late in making a response. So this is how that will look in the minified view. Remember, you never see just that. You see that superimposed on top of the natural view. But this is what the subject sees in this experiment. So it's a pretty crude image to work with. And the setup is the screen, the subject in front of the screen, and then this is the virtual mole, which flips along this zigzag direction. The obstacle appears at different path offsets, and the subject has to call whether they're going to collide or not collide with this. And these are the results of what we call the collision envelope, the space around the subject that they think they're going to collide with, or the path distance that they, at 50%, call this collision. Without the device, it was around 70 centimeters, and with the device, it was a little over 80. And this difference of 18% was actually statistically significant. But the minification was 5 times. So it's actually 500% difference, and results only in a tiny fraction of this, of 18%. So they're able to get rid of most of this effect with little difficulty, and this is done with only 10 minutes of training people in the use of this device. So it doesn't take learning a lot how to do that. So the conclusion from that was that the augmented vision device using special multiplexing by superposition may effectively and safely serve as a field expander for patients with tunnel vision. Now, I mentioned this cosmetics first. This is the first HMD that was used in low vision. It was called Elvis. And as you can see, it provided only magnification. And you can see that ergonomics and cosmetics were not a big deal. And these are the kind of devices that are on the market today. They're much better than this early device, but still they're far from being great in terms of cosmetics in both terms, the way that I use it. Now we try to improve it, so we worked with micro-optical to develop these cosmetically better looking devices. You've seen this is in 2000, 2002, and the latest micro-optical design was 2007. Is shown here, and this was the package that includes the drivers for the display, the camera, and the image processing to get the cartoon. Of course, it doesn't show the battery. It's about twice as large as this. But still pretty nice and compact system. Unfortunately, micro-optical went out of business because they tried to use to do some other product rather than what they had technology for. So we are now using this device made by a company from Israel called Loomis, and their early web setup looked like this, which is gorgeous. So we went right to them, and this is how it looks now. So now this is a little worse than it is because we put on that camera on, and it certainly can be done better than that, and we put this LCD shutters in front of it for some other device that we're working with. But you can see that this is not there yet, but it's approaching. In one property that it has better than those others is eye contact. Eye contact is crucial for social interaction, and these other devices eliminate it, and this is another issue with this. So we move on to another condition called hemianopia. Hemianopia is a loss of half the visual field on one side in both eyes. That is, the left in both eyes, half the visual field is gone, or the right. You get that from a head trauma. If you lose the left side of the brain, you lose the vision on the right side of the brain injured, you get loss on the left. The most common cause is stroke, but surgery and car accidents and motorcycle disease is what I call it. So this is how the visual field of a patient with right hemianopia looks. This is where he sees normally, and you see, and on the right there's nothing. Now, we use spatial multiplexing by shifting to try to help these people. So we take the central and peripheral view and we present them simultaneously but shifted relative to each other. We do that with prisms. So we put prisms on the glasses. The base of the prism is to the side of the visual loss. So if it's a right hemianopia, the base of the prism is to the right, so it moves from the right to the left, the image. It is placed across the whole lens of both eyes in this design. Above and below, a clear segment that is nothing but the normal prescription. It affects only peripheral vision, so you can use very high power prism. If you use high power prism in other designs that affects the center, they reduce the resolution because prism has deteriorating effects, color, fringes, and other things. It shifts the upper and lower visual field, and it shifts them relative to the central. And thus, it expands the field of view. And it does that in all position of gaze. So whether you look right and left or center, you get the effect because you're always under that prism. So how does that look, again, in that terminal if you have this condition in this thing? So looking at the terminal, if you look there and you have right hemianopia, then you don't see anything on the right. No, you don't see anything. It's not black. It's not dark. It's just like you don't see behind you. You don't see on the right. It's hard to illustrate and somewhat hard to think about, but think about how you don't see here. It's the same thing, only here. And with this device, then you get these effects. You may not notice that you get something changed here too. So these are the field expansions effect. So you can tell that there's a woman here or something that you have to watch for. But at the same time, you're losing something here. You lose that because at the apex of every prism there is a blind spot. We call that scotoma. And it's just exists at the apex of every prism. It's just the property of prism to have a blind spot. You can try it yourself later and you'll see. But this is not a problem because you see most of this guy, and if you lose his head, you want to see it, you can just raise your head a little and you'll see him. So this is how you get the spatial multiplexing by shifting to let you maintain both the central vision with sharp and gain peripheral vision without losing much. So this is again a visual field of a patient with hemianopia, and this is the visual field recorded with this. So these are the areas that are being expanded. And you may think that these are small. Relatively speaking, only a little part get restored. But if you remember what I said, to get legally blind, you have to have a diameter of 20 degrees, which is this. And this adds a radius, if you want, of 20 degrees. And now we can even add 30 degrees. So you get quite a lot that would be quite meaningful. So this is the expanded field. This is the prism scotoma, or the blind spot from the apex of the right prism from the left prism. And what I show you here is that by designing the apex of the prism in the right place, you can make them minimally overlap or even not overlap at all. And only when they really overlap, the person gets a blind spot and they don't see the head. With this kind of a design, only a very small portion of the field will be missing. So again, you can play with this and recover this. You can also place the prism in front of one eye only and still get the effect. You're now combining spatial multiplexing by shifting with biocular multiplexing, different images to both eyes. In this situation, the eye without the prism is seeing the parts that are missing through the blind spot of the prism itself. So you try to build that now. You know, on paper, everything is the paper accepts everything, but now you try to build it, you want to make a large effect. What I showed you was 40 prism diopters, which is 20-degree prism. So 20-degree prism is a big thing. And when I showed that to a patient first time, this is one of the early design, he said, don't you worry that birds are going to land on this? And this is kind of a cute way to say, I'm worried about how it looks. So we tried to reduce it, and we built this design in which there were 2 segments in front and another segment on the back. And this is kind of a degenerate Fresnel prism. And as you can see, it's better. This was very expensive design, and some people could afford even sunglasses. And you know that works when that person says somebody set on their sunglasses, they want another pair. Each one of these cost $2,000 at the time. So we thought this was not workable, so we developed with a small company in Vermont this design with small Fresnel prisms. You can see that even small birds can't land of it in this view from above. And cosmetically, in the terms of being pretty hidden, it's reasonable. It's passing reasonable judgment for most people. So then we did studies. You need to do these kind of things, evaluate them, see if other people could do them. So we had a community-based multi-center studies in many clinics around the country, and 43 patients entered into this, and 74% of them continued to wear after 6 weeks of the study, and after a year, half of them were still wearing it. In our business, this is a great success. In fact, in most medical things, this is a great success, but in ours particularly. So again, this is published, and you can find more detail about it. Now, the thing with the hemianopia is that its effect on most people is mostly that it prevents them from driving. You can imagine that driving with that kind of field loss may be problematic. So they're interested in driving. And the question is, could they drive with this? Well, this is the field of view through the windshield of a regular car. As you can see, the improvement is to see the visor here and the dashboard here. That's not very useful. This is a little overstatement because these fields are attached to the glasses. So if you lower your head, this will move into the windshield. If you raise your head, this will move onto the road. And so it's a little overstating it, but it's not an optimal solution for this. So looking for a solution, we started with this design where the prism, this is the Fresnel prism, and the base of the prism is here. If we just tilted the prism, we could get the field to look this way, keeping it in the same place. So this is how it looks. The prism is still there. There's still the central vision, permitting binocular vision to be maintained, not interrupted, sharp, clear vision centrally. But now, this prism take a part of the field here and bring it there, and this one take a part of the field there and bring it here to the same peripheral location. So the principle has not changed, but we're covering now area that falls within the field of the windshield. And we are now, of course, nothing is for free. You guys got to know that by now. So when you tilt the prism, you lose some power laterally because you gain it vertically. So we felt that we needed more power, so we expanded to 57 prism diopters, which give you 30 degrees expansion, and then we can give up some of that and still get actually more than 20 degrees laterally. So now you want to study it on the road. It was difficult to find a place to do it in the US, so we did this study in Belgium where you can get licensed to drive with hemianopia if you pass a road test. It's also true in Holland, and recently the law was changed in England to do that. And at least in Quebec, in Canada, it's also a recent change that now people with this condition could drive if they passed a road test. So we did that. Anybody who's been in Belgium knows the roads there are very busy. There's these bicycle tracks with their own traffic lights and huge number of pedestrians, etc. We did it in a dual control car, 2 evaluators that are the examiners of the Belgium road safety, the people that license the people for that, and a backseat evaluator who is a collaborator of ours. They had one pre-fitting on the road test, so they went on the road before we gave them the prism, then they used the prism, and they had 2 tests, one with a sham prism. We just put a very weak prism on to mask the evaluators. The patients would know because they see that there's no effect with those prisms. Well, they should know that. It's not clear that they would. And then the real prism. And these are just some of the results. So you see here the percent satisfactory response to unexpected hazards. And satisfactory was a score of 4 or 5. So with no prism or sharp prism, you get something with about 60% satisfactory response. And with the prism, over 80%. I'm not sure that that's good enough, but it clearly shows that these things help in this. And this difference, again, is statistically significant. Now, when the situation was getting dangerous, the instructor will intervene, either brake, use this gas. In these cars, they actually have gas, or reach for the steering wheel and pull it. So you see here the number of interference with no prism, sham prism, and real prism on the blind side and on the seeing side. And you can see clearly that with the real prism, there are a lot less interventions with the real prism. In this case, of course, fewer is better. So again, an indication that it is better. But again, it's not 0, and we don't know if this is sufficient. So this is still being investigated. The third low vision condition that we're going to talk about is central field loss. This is result in reduced visual acuity and contrast sensitivity. It is most commonly an effect of macular degeneration. When visual acuity drops to 2200, it's legal blindness. Reading difficulty is a common complaint for these people, but we have many devices available to help them. If somebody has this kind of reduced vision and they want to read, I can help them. There are devices. But they also want to watch TV, recognize people for social situation, and they want to drive. And there are minimal visual aids available for that. So just to orient you, again, this is the peripheral field, the normal peripheral field. This is the central field of view, the kind that you get with a retinal camera. This is the optic nerve head. So the tunnel vision people had only this part as a residual vision out of this whole field, a really tiny fraction. And these people have only that loosed. This is a scar on the retina of such a patient, and this is the part that is missing. This part we all miss. That's the blind spot where the optic nerve leaves the eye. So that's all they lose. It's a tiny fraction, but yet that's where all the sharp vision is. So this is how a person with that kind of condition will see. Now we don't get the audio. You said that the audio is working. Is there a volume on that? Anyway, you can see that there's an area where they see next to nothing, and then it's as loud as it goes. You hear something? My volume is up. That's okay. So what you can see here is that this person approaches, the vision gets better, and that's the value of magnification. But the important thing is to get this close to the area with the best vision next to the blind spot. But you can see that seeing with this is quite challenging. So what do we do? Well, believe it or not, for driving, people use this device. It's called a bioptic, and it's a telescope mounted in the glasses. Most of the time, the patient drives using the regular lens. So they have no effect of that device and no side effect or problem of this device. When they see something they can't resolve, they lower their head, spot through the telescope quickly, and get the information they need, go back into this other condition, and continue on their way. They only spend a second or a second and a half inside the telescope, or that's what they're told to do. It's permitted for use in driving in 39 states, including Colorado. So there are people driving around with this. So this is an example of temporal multiplexing, alternating peripheral and central views in time. Now, the main criticism of this is the following. If you come to this kind of an intersection, and this is the field of view of the telescope, and your low vision, you can't read this because you have low vision. You look through the telescope and you can read the signs, so you can find your way, but look what it does to the view of the intersection. This larger image is occupying a larger part of the retina that before you turned your head down was occupied with the image of the road. So now you don't see parts of the road. This is called the ring scotoma. There is a ring blind spot. And this is considered a problem of these devices. So we have devised, and the other problem of this device, of course, is their cosmetic appearance. Nobody liked the fact that they're as visible as they are. So we came up with this device, which is an embedded telescope inside the spectacle lens. This is view from above, front, and side view. So the light comes in, and let's assume there's a lens here for a Keplerian telescope, and then it hits this mirror, goes down, these two mirrors to reverse the image again, comes back to this, and to the last lens, and now into the patient's eye. So this is almost embedded. The lenses are stuck on the surface of the spectacle lens, so this is suboptimal. But what I want you to note is that if we take this last mirror and tilt it a little, what is that going to do? It's going to throw the image up. Now how is that going to look in this intersection? It's going to put that image up here. Now see what happened to the intersection view. So this is another spatial multiplexing by shifting. Now of course there's nothing for nothing. You lose the visual field here. You have to lose it. There's no way. The retina is occupied by that. But this part of the visual field is rarely very important. There are, however, extreme situations where it is. This policeman would have liked to see what was coming from above before it hit. But that's quite rare, although I recently found another example of a poor jogger who got hit by a plane that landed on the beach. Yeah, so more than once. Now, a more advanced design of the same thing is shown here. This time, it's completely embedded. It uses spherical mirror and beam splitters and polarized beam splitters to save some light loss that would occur in the beam splitter otherwise. And this makes for a fully embedded design, and we published that, and we built some crude prototypes. You know it's a crude prototype because we used blue tack. And so here's one component for which we use one of those elements from the display, and another component off the shelf, our shelf, a beam splitter. So the coloring is because this was what was there. But with that, we could get a magnified image of the clock across the street. And it's reversed because we used only these two without the reversing mirrors. And this is just tilting it to show that indeed you can get both views together. Again, this is very crude, but actually tomorrow I'm going to go to visit Rio company here to see if they can build for us components for this, because it looks like it fits right in their capabilities to do something like that. The other thing we're addressing for patients is TV viewing. Now, features in a normal video may be too small for people with poor visual acuity, but magnification can help. We already discussed that. And magnification with television is easy. But if you magnify around the center, as most of these, you may often lose the interesting part of the scene. As in this situation, you don't really care for that. You want to see the guy with the ball in this situation. So this is what you want to get. How can we get there? We have to magnify it around the center of interest. And how do we get that? Well, there are many ways to select it. It is done now for movie to TV editing. The magnification ratio there is very small. It's 4:3. It is done manually by experts. and there's copyright issues that affect this. But what we did is to measure the eye movement of normally sighted people to determine where they were looking when they were looking at a movie. And we're saying that this would work only if people look at the same place. Because if everybody looks differently, then this technique will not work. So we used 20 observers, young and old, male or female. We had them look at various movies for 37 minutes. This is an example of that. Unfortunately, we don't have the sound, but you can see that 20 observers are kind of distributed, but when Juliet appears and starts speaking, you can hear that she's speaking now. Basically, everybody's there. So when there is something to see, people are there. So people do look. Huh? What? There's one. There's a wanderer. Yeah, there's always a wanderer. But they were within 13% of the screen area 50% of the time. And there was little difference between age and gender groups. We really thought that there would be differences, but the only thing we found was that young women were more widely distributed in their attention than all the other groups. So again, unfortunately, without the sound, this is less impressive, but this is how we implemented this. So you look at a video, and there's the eye movement recording. You may hear some of that. These guys are strong enough you can hear them with low volume. So you can see the eye movement recording moving around. Are you able to see that little cross? It's not very good. You can see it. No. So now we take this eye movement and we center the magnified view around that. So in fact, the cross should be fixed in its position, although there are boundary conditions here that change this, so we can talk about that. But you can see how that looks with this. Now with the transition, we thought will be very difficult, and it'll require a lot of smoothing or some changes, but you can see that we've done basically nothing here, and it's completely natural. We've grown on video cut so much that we have no problem accepting this, even when they're created in this artificial way, which maybe is not that artificial because it went where people looked. So, and we can talk about what are the boundary conditions. So the only additional thing that ties it to the multiplexing here is that you lose a lot of the screen when you do that. If you magnified 4 times, only 1/16 of the screen is in view. So you may, looking at what the other guys, but you may not know what's going on outside, and as an individual viewer, you may want to change this view. This is supposed to be all controlled with a remote control. So we could put the unmagnified view in a cartoon in the same approach that we used for the tunnel vision. And what we found is that it's good to use a bipolar edge, an edge that has both the white and black edges, the white on the bright side of the edge and the black, which came naturally from an algorithm I developed to describe edge detection in the visual system. But as you can see here, this works nicely because on a dark background you see the white, on the white background you see the black, and when the transition occurs, your visual system doesn't even notice it. It's completely natural to see the object and follow it with these bipolar edges. So you can take this and use it when you prepare any kind of a presentation of any sort, not just this. It could work well for all your PowerPoint presentations. So to summarize, understanding of normal visual function can guide successful development of device rehabilitation. Multiplexing is a promising concept for development of low vision devices. It requires rigorous evaluation to validate each application, and those are actually more challenging than coming up with new devices. And the role of attention and cognitive issues in viewing multiplexed images and displays is only starting to be explored. We're studying as others, and I just didn't have time to present it here. And the cosmetics is a crucial issue, and it's not resolved yet. I don't do that alone. A lot of people help in the lab. These are people directly involved in the project here, but the lab is much larger than that. And this is other people from other organizations and groups that have been participating in this project. Thank you very much for your attention. We ran long. Yes, go ahead.
I was wondering if people that look at these multiplex images, if they wear these devices long enough, do they eventually start feeling as though they're synthesizing the same kind of view a normal person is? Or?
We don't know that because, let's split them to the different ones.
Yeah.
The people with the prism there's a lot of people now, between 500 to 1,000 at least, wearing these. And they over a long term, and they suggest that it works for them. It helps them avoid obstacles, and the problems they have are not in the scene view. They report some glare effect because of the edges of those prisms, and we haven't bothered yet to tackle that. There's other things that are ahead of it. The cartoon over the image is more complicated. It turns out that seeing two scenes, even if it's the same scene at different magnification, and we actually explore that specific thing, but seeing two scenes is difficult. So you attend only to one of them. And in experiments that others did and that we replicated, we find that if you put an unexpected event into the cartoon minified view, it's being detected only 50% of the time. And I knew this basic studies in which they did this two videos superimposed, but they were very different videos. One is a basketball game and the other one is a gorilla coming into the game, or things like, you must have seen that stuff. And I said, well, there you have to work so hard to separate the two images, the two videos, that you suppress the one. But here, it's easy to separate because one is a cartoon. We did that in all the conditions. It didn't affect it. It's still 50%. Then we said, okay, in our situation, it's not two scenes. It's actually the same scene. So we again created the scenes, and we created unexpected events in them, and yet it's 50%. So people are only able to catch about 50% of that. So we're saying, okay, 50% is not great, but it's zero without that. So 50% sounds pretty good, but we're not satisfied with that because we think that we can do better. And the way we're going better with that is when we analyze the result of this collision detected from the cartoon, we figure that people were able to do that very easily to detect collision. And so we went into the literature and analyzed what the situation, and we figure out that there's a very simple relationship between the lateral shift and the magnification that define collision. So we already have an image, a video. We already have a computer processing it to get the cartoon. We can also process it to detect collision. And if there is a collision, we're going to alert you somehow, either by sound or by flashing those cartoon, to get your attention into the cartoon. And we've shown that if you attend to the cartoon, you detect 100% of the events. So it's not the fact that there are two images, it's that it's in the one you don't attend to. So if we can get your attention by detecting collision and alerting you, you'll get that. So we're working on these projects now. The two subs of this, one is to actually detect the collision, which may have use in other situations, and the other is to then implement it with this and see how that works. So it's a long answer, but
one last question.
yeah, we are late. It's very difficult. It's difficult because, for many reasons. First of all, the resolution is poor. But even with magnification that compensate for that, people with that, normal reading rate is about 300 words per minute. People with that kind of a situation can come to 100 words per minute, and that's it. And even if you magnify it more, now, you got to realize when you magnify it all, it goes further out, so it's not without problem. The magnification is a problematic situation. But the problems are more in the brain. These parts of the brain that gets the signal from these parts of the retina were not participating in reading and in the time that you learn to read, and they were not designed for that kind of activity. So various things have been tried. So far, nobody has made any major breakthrough. You know, you can move it from 100 to 120, 125, but that's still not moving you substantially into what you need to get. That's another issue. When you lose the vision this way, when you lose the second eye, you start using a point outside. So you select a point on the retina that you now use instead of the fovea. And your eye movement control is very poor with the peripheral vision. This is actually what I did for my master's before I knew anything about these diseases. I studied eye movement control with peripheral vision, which is very poor. And so the eye movement control is poor, the stability of the eye on the target is poor, and there's argument, and people get better with that. They do learn to fixate or keep their eye controlled better with time. And presumably that helps to get some improvement in vision. But again, the effects they are statistically significant, they're measurable, but they're not life-altering. They're not satisfactory to the patients, they're not satisfactory to us. There's an open area there.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you very much.